Okay, I'll say that again then.
This meeting is being recorded.
I'd like to welcome you all to the April meeting of the Yarmouth Energy Committee meeting. We are 4 today with some people out of town. I'm Joyce Flynn, the chair, and I'm here with Sandy Cashin, with Barry Margolin, and with Bob in the background, and you'll be able to see his face any minute. That's Bob Palmieri.
Here I am.
Okay, yeah, that was Bob Palmieri also. I'd introduce members of the public, but we don't seem to have any today. So I guess we'll move immediately to approval of minutes. We have some back minutes to approve because of losing our longtime secretary, Marilyn Holly. If you could look at the things that you have been sent. Sandy, would you be able to get those up on the screen one by one, our 4 sets of minutes?
Hang on, I didn't have those prepared, so let's.
Oh, okay. Well, if you have looked at the ones that you had earlier, those are the December and January ones. I told Marilyn that I would do those. Are there any thoughts that you
Marjorie?
had while skimming them?
Could you?
I will approve the December
I
and
put the wrong
January
mouse. There's a
minutes
mouse
as
that's
written.
like this, but
Okay.
it's
Do
a
we have a
Logitech
second?
mouse. Second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the December 2022 and January 2023 meeting minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, I think it's, yeah, it is unanimous. Okay. Now you've received more recently the February minutes from Bob. Did you
I sent the March ones too.
Okay, but I was doing it in order.
So here's your February.
Okay, great. Thank you. So these are the ones very recently received, and these are for our February meeting. This is where we transitioned to the new secretary. Looked like a pretty quiet meeting. Any motions?
I'll make a motion to accept the February meeting as written. However, the members of the public, do we have to have last names on those, or is Josh and his spouse
Josh
okay?
and spouse. What, we have Josh's name somewhere. He's not one of our Solarize Yarmouth customers, but why don't you figure that let's amend them to include Josh's last name, and I will find that before we file them.
Okay.
Because I know he was in touch at one other point. So I should.
Yeah, that was the second time he was on a meeting.
Yeah, is that Josh Uhalt? Do you remember?
Like,
Okay, if
me
it's
and-
Josh Uhalt, that would be back in August that he was here. So let me write myself a note. Josh, last name from February, and figure that Bob, your minutes are perfect except for that omission, and I'll add that so we'll be able to post them as soon as I get that to Sandy.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess we're set for the March meeting minutes.
Well, did we have a vote?
Oh,
There
we
was-
had one.
There's
Yeah,
a-
we just had one.
Okay.
Okay, and but Sandy is right that I added that idea of my amending by inserting last name afterwards. If you want to vote again on that, we can. Or not. Here are March meeting minutes. Okay. Okay. Barry, you have any reactions to the part on your remarks?
No,
Are you going to tell us your reactions?
no. I have to concede. Somebody will need to talk to me if I should take the significance of our archives more seriously than I do. But since we don't actually exercise any authority over anybody or anything, I guess I feel like this is somewhat just complying with the rule.
Okay,
Well, we got you on tape.
okay. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Barry? Because we can do that.
No, no, thanks.
Okay, and your presentation today will put in the minutes for this meeting, so that should give everyone a good idea of what you're exploring. Okay,
so
do we have any motions about this?
I'll make a motion to accept the March minutes as written.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye. Okay, passes unanimously, and now we are caught up on minutes. Marilyn, if you're listening, it took us 4 months to catch up from all the work you did, but thank you for having done it all those years.
Now let me
Okay.
see if I can get back to my thing without, because the closed captioning is on the bottom, I can't seem to get into full.
Well, don't
Oh, you can
worry about
continue on. I'll get to it. as
Okay,
soon-
don't worry too much about that, Sandy. As long as what we say is recorded, if we're in little pictures, that's fine. Okay, I don't see Amanda with us, so I assume that we don't have an update on town energy news right now. As you saw, CVAC has been in touch with Energy Committee to ask for a slot to meet with us and give an update on what CVAC is up to. Amanda is our appointed representative to CVAC, so that I suspect I should reach out to her since she's on the board and let her know that staff, presumably the director from CVAC, would like to appear. Bob, you suggested that we schedule that for May. How does that work for everybody? That we're frankly going to have to, if the last time was any indication, kind of keep it from being a commercial for CVAC and keep the time down to, I'd say, 15 to 18 minutes. It looks to me like we can easily fit that into the May meeting. Any thoughts?
That seems fine to me.
Okay, not hearing any objections, let's tentatively put that on our May meeting schedule, and we can amend that up to the time of filing the agenda. Okay, Cape Light Compact. Our next board meeting is a week from tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the Compact headquarters on White's Path. We're having a retreat of all the board members tomorrow to work on envisioning what the compact could be with a more friendly administration, and in particular, a more friendly Department of Public Utilities. Already we're seeing that we're getting permission to move ahead on the strategic electrification, the project for supplying heat pumps, solar panels, and energy storage to a tiny group of low-income customers. It's 1/30 of the size it was when it was initially proposed 5 years ago, and when it would have gone across several income groups. So that gives you an idea, I think, of how DPU the past few years has been a challenge to anything new that the compact wanted to try. The that might sound like a very expensive notion, and it is, except that remember, part of the mandate for Cape Light Compact as an energy aggregator is to take care of low-income customers. And so some of the funding for that would have come out of the stream to help low-income customers. Okay, so any questions about the compact?
Yeah, Joyce, I'm, I saw the news about CPEO, the electrification offering, and it was great. It looked like it was a smaller number of beneficiaries even than I remember Maggie describing, I don't know, a year or so ago when she first told me about it. And was it downsized to get through the regulatory hurdle, or like, could it be larger? Does the compact have the financial capacity to do the same thing for a larger number of customers if it had permission to do it?
Yes, because the compact works on 3-year plans, so that would all be budgeted in for the 3-year plan. So our next 3-year plan begins in 2024. So what we could do to get back to the original 750 customers or more would be to budget that in and have that as part of what we argue for our 3-year plan for energy efficiency in front of the DPU. The DPU shot this down multiple times, and ultimately the 30 number came from them. But that's the old DPU, and 3 new members have been appointed, and we expect to find much more common vision with them, especially under the new energy legislation, which is also very favorable to doing things as opposed to trimming down things. I think the next plan will show a big jump forward, in short. Okay, anything else about the compact? Okay, moving on to Solarize Plus Yarmouth. There isn't a lot of news. It's kind of a nothing burger this month. There was a creditors meeting on February 22nd. The bankruptcy court has decided not to do up, apparently it's expensive, to do up an unofficial transcript of that. But I got, Sandy, you'll maybe just want to listen to this. I did get a recording over a secure channel from the bankruptcy trustee's assistant. And so I'm going to be sharing that with the whole mailing list on the new update that goes out this week. You'll notice, if you do have the time to listen to it, you'll notice a real change in tone. It's pointed out that there have been inaccuracies presented under oath. Certainly everything is formalized to the point where Ted Strzelecki is now addressing the trustee as Mr. Baldiga.
You're being nice, Joyce. They were lies.
Oh, they were whoppers. They were whoppers. But nothing will ever match the drama of that long December 7th creditors meeting, where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it turned out there was a large Ameritrade account, which was already gone. But where it went is being looked at very closely by the trustee, and the trustee made that clear in the February meeting. More records came up from Solar Wolf. Remember, they had their 6 or 7 bank accounts. They still are missing a few records, and so the trustee has set the next creditors meeting for May 24th. way in the future in terms of this kind of procedure, with the idea that they'll all be found and analyzed by them. The final thing I'd say about the change in tone is Ted went to jump in about other assets that the trustee was asking about that hadn't come up yet, and his lawyer stopped him. Okay, enough said. Any questions about Solarize Plus? We do have one disappointment in this. I mean, nothing burger of the month, but something kind of deteriorating. Mass Clean Energy Center had taken on responsibility for the remaining installations. People who had panels up on their roofs, presumably had all the equipment, but needed to have it inspected and commissioned, that is connected to net metering. It turned out that to avoid voiding the 25-year SunPower warranty, that had to be done by a SunPower certified technician in the presence of an electrician, if the person wasn't also an electrician, to preserve the warranty. And so that scuttled the plan that was Plan A, where the Clean Energy Center was going to pay My Generation Energy to do the last few steps on those. And I wrote and asked about progress on that, didn't hear back in time for this meeting. So I'm assuming progress is limping at best, but that we'll soon have a Plan B.
Isn't My Generation Energy a SunPower installer?
Excuse me.
No, I think E2 is the only Cape
Oh,
Bay.
okay,
uh,
okay.
E2
SunPower
and Blue
installer.
Cell are the ones on the Cape. Excuse me. So anybody have any questions about Solarize Plus Yarmouth? I have one question. Bob, did you order your heat pumps yet?
No,
Okay, just checking.
I have to sort out eligibility for rebates because our house is owned by a family trust.
Oh, yeah. That turns out 2 of our Solarize houses are owned by family trusts, which gets tricky with the Home Improvement Contractor Guarantees Fund.
Yeah,
One of our lawyers has, one of our customers has sought an attorney's opinion on the second home thing and what is defined as primary home, and is willing to share that with other people who might be disqualified for more than one home. So I'm going to, in the update, ask them to get in touch with me and send out the information to them rather than blast it to all the people who, of course, include some of the people who would be critiquing and possibly arguing against the argument. Okay, well, Barry, at this point, we turn it over to you. We're going to get the full press of the Mass Municipal Opt-in Specialized Stretch Code, and we really appreciate the deep dive you've done into the details on this.
Okay, so my first challenge is going to be to figure out how to share my screen. I think I've got it. Does that work?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
So this is, I actually emailed this to all the members of the committee as the meeting began so that you've got copies, and this is still a draft of a presentation that down the road may be used more widely and publicly, and would love feedback on everything from proofreading and editing to, better arguments, a need for either more or less detail. So, comments.
So
this- welcome.
this presentation is in draft. The code itself is
Yes,
fixed.
yes, yeah, I'm just talking about the PowerPoint that
Okay,
I'm gonna
okay.
go through, because the code is dense. There's there are a huge number of provisions, and making it communicable to citizens is one of the challenges I'm trying to address here. It's also draft because it is expected to be a joint effort of 350 Cape Cod, which has already endorsed the project, and the Cape Cod Climate Action Network, which is a somewhat broader organization across many towns. But the Climate Action Network hasn't actually had a chance to meet on it yet. It was going to meet in March, but the date overlapped with the presentation in Truro of the warrant article that Truro will actually be voting on later this month to adopt the specialized code. So that, in context for the presentation, probably everybody here knows the background. In 2008, the Green Communities Act was the first big climate legislation in Massachusetts. It authorized the creation of the original stretch code tied to eligibility for funding as green communities. And by now, 14 of the 15 Cape Cod towns, including Yarmouth, thanks to the noble work of an earlier energy committee, adopted the Green Communities Stretch Code. That's significant because under the 2021 Climate Roadmap Act, which is the latest big move by the legislature on climate change, the Green Communities Stretch Code is still in place, but has just been significantly updated and strengthened. And those changes in the Green Communities Stretch Code automatically apply to Yarmouth and all of the other towns across the state that became green communities. There's no need for further town action to put those changes into effect, but the changes are pretty material. And one of the complications of this is distinguishing between what's already in place because we are a green community and what would be different if we adopted the opt-in specialized energy code. The specialized code was designed by the legislature to empower the Department of Energy Resources to craft the building code provisions that would be necessary if the state is going to live up to its goal of reaching net zero emissions by 2050. That was the task that the DOER took on, and their explanation for how they came to this version of the specialized code. Well, the Green Communities Code has a lot of great energy efficiency provisions. It wouldn't get us there. And the opt-in specialized code, which is now available for adoption by Massachusetts towns, is the roadmap to actually make it feasible for the state to reach net zero emissions on its set of goals. There are separate sections of the specialized code for residential and for commercial. For residential, there is a somewhat higher energy efficiency rating required than under the Green Communities Stretch Code. More significantly, new homes have to meet one of three tests. They either have to be zero energy homes, meaning that they have enough solar power to provide all of the net energy use of that house, or all electric homes. Or if they're mixed fuel homes, they have to basically be designed and engineered so that they are ready for conversion to all electric whenever a homeowner moves in who wants to do that. So they have to be wired fully so that if you've got a gas outlet for a stove, right next to it, there is an electric outlet that could power that stove. If you've got a furnace, there is a spot in the backyard for a heat pump and wiring to connect the heat pump. and ducts to to connect the heat pump to the central system, so that the house is completely ready to go all electric. If you want to use gas, you're permitted to for homes smaller than 4,000 square feet, which is most homes. But you're going to have to spend the money to make it ready for all electric, which is a pretty strong incentive for builders to go all electric. Because if you're going to design and engineer and wire the house for electricity, and then basically spend the money to also design and pipe it for gas, it's a more expensive building project. And the clear intent of the legislature and DOER is to strongly incentivize new construction to be all electric. Larger homes over 4,000 square feet have to be either all electric or zero energy, which essentially is also all electric, but it's better. It's all electric with renewable energy to supply the power. Multi-family buildings over 12,000 square feet have to actually be passive houses, which means that it's the kind of design that our architect visitor from last month described for the Wellfleet affordable project, which is it's designed so tightly and efficiently that it consumes a thimble of energy to provide all the heating and cooling. And by the way, Habitat for Humanity also designs its homes as passive houses, so that homeowners with a fairly small set of solar panels have no utility bills going forward. The electricity powers everything, and it's such a tightly built house that the solar panels on the roof provide all the necessary energy. Major additions to houses used to not be subject to the stretch code. Under the updated Green Community Stretch Code, they are now subject to the stretch code, but they're not the specialized code doesn't change any of that. Additions are under our existing Green Community Stretch Code. Because of the update, additions are now subject to the stretch code rules. For commercial buildings, it's a pretty similar set of categories. New commercial buildings have to either be zero energy, that is essentially powered by their own renewable energy supply, or all electric, or if they're using mixed fuels, if they're using gas basically for heating, they've got to be designed and built so that they're pre-wired to convert everything to electric appliances as soon as somebody's ready to do that. So again, the intent, as Senator Barrett, who was the key author of this whole thing, described it, the combination of incentives, all of the financial support now provided to electrify buildings, and the stick of, if you're going to do it mixed fuel, it's going to be a pretty inefficient project because you're going to have to do both the electric and gas infrastructure. The goal is to make all new construction in the state all electric. There's another parallel set of energy efficiency requirements for new commercial projects, but they're all part of the updated Green Community Stretch Code. They're not being imposed by the specialized code, and they're all about designing the buildings to be much more basically tight, energy efficient. So very strict rules about minimizing air leakage, about ventilation energy exchange so that the ventilation is efficient, mitigating thermal bridges, which means spots in the outside of a building where you might have something, a piece of steel moving from the outside of the building to the inside that transports heat inefficiently. A bunch of technical requirements that are potentially challenging for the building inspectors to oversee, but those aren't requirements of the specialized code. Those are now requirements of the Green Community Stretch Code that's already in force. So there's a set of rules for testing the level of leakage in major new commercial buildings. That looks to me like it's going to be ambitious. But again, that's not as a result of the specialized code. That's part of the updated Green Communities Code. So
How many communities, I mean, town governments in their building departments have the capacity to do the testing or assessing or whatever it is of these new buildings?
Well, I think that the burden is not really on the towns. It is on the consultants hired by the builders to certify that the building meets the code standard.
Okay, so
Because that's already part of the Green Communities stretch code, the old one, before the update.
okay.
There's a
So
lot of
it's,
numerical requirements that they've had to meet, and that's all hired out. It's not, I'm sure it's not the local building
so it's
inspector.
in the private sector rather than in the government.
Yes,
Okay,
that's, yeah, I mean, I wanted the same thing, but then I looked at the existing Green Communities Code, and while the new rules are more demanding, they're just revisions of existing numerical rules for what the tests that a commercial building has to certify it meets to get a building permit.
so there would be companies like Rise Engineering that would be accredited to do this kind of assessment.
Yeah, I think there's actually, I mean, it's Rise is probably more specifically about retrofitting buildings, but there's a lot of engineering consultants who are in the business of selling this kind of service to
Yeah, okay.
contractors. I mean, the nutshell, I think, of what the specialized code does and is intended to do is, over and above all of the energy efficiency standards of building a tighter, better building, is to push builders towards building them for electric power rather than gas.
I remember in the old days of energy conservation, going back to the 1970s after the OPEC thing, the one of the big worries, and part of it has come true, was the problem of mold. When you start sealing up a house, you have all these sweaty people living inside of it, and you get a mold problem. And of course, we do have mold problems in a lot of houses. Have these new specialized codes included the moisture mitigation or whatever?
Well, it's not in the specialized code, it's in the updated Green Communities Code
Okay,
that better ventilation is one of the core principles that
yeah,
you can't
okay.
you can't depend on air vents in the bathroom, but you've got to actually have an air exchange system that maintains a healthy house.
Yeah, okay.
That's applicable to all new construction now.
Yeah, and of course, that's right, that's been one of the concerns right from the beginning when we started the energy conservation back in 50 years ago.
So the DOER's position is basically that these all electric energy efficient buildings are going to be more affordable than conventional gas fueled buildings to construct. That wiring for all electric appliances and connecting to the power grid is cheaper than piping for gas and connecting to the gas pipelines, even before the federal and state incentives and rebates that incentivize going all electric. And that, DOER spells out in the background materials for both the updated Green Communities Code and the specialized code that the guiding principle is that if you're building new buildings now that are going to last until we're supposed to be at net zero, and building them to be powered by gas, it's just crazy. It doesn't fit the goal, while over time the electric grid is going to become entirely renewable energy. And so that while the grid is not currently free of fossil fuel, it'll be increasingly free of fossil fuel as time goes forward. And we're setting the rules for buildings going up now that are going to still be there in 50 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I first looked at this, the thing that worried me most was the argument that this will be fatal for affordable housing. And that's partly just because Housing Assistance Corporation has, I believe, taken that posture. I don't know if they're going to continue to maintain that. But they're very dependent on developers for their budget. And what we heard last month from the folks building the Johnson Road project was incredibly impactful, because it's not only theoretically possible to design an energy efficient, affordable housing complex that more than meets the requirements of the specialized code, it's actually being done on the Cape in one of the larger affordable projects, because most affordable projects are basically market rate apartment buildings which set aside a relatively small number of units as affordable. Lawrence Road is 100% affordable units. So 46 new affordable units is pretty big. I think the first time I did a draft of this, I was suggesting a carve out for 40B housing, and got persuaded, both because all the advocates around the state, including the state, are arguing that this should apply to multifamily housing generally, including affordable projects. And clearly we've learned firsthand from the builder side that it can be done. And there's just a couple of slides that copy some slides from the Department of Energy Resources, making the case that all electric buildings are economically sensible. They're generally cheaper to build. They get incentives from the state and the feds. And they've published pretty detailed cost benefit studies of every category of building that they did as part of the backdrop to developing the specialized code. And their experts certify that it is going to be cheaper to build to the new standards than to build a conventional gas building. Obviously also a lot cheaper for the people living in it, and the commercial tenants, if their total energy consumption is less. The goal of the Green Communities update is to reduce the total energy demand of a new building by 90% below traditional building strategies. It's a pretty radical emphasis on efficiency. The efficiency part is in the updated Green Communities Code. The electrification piece is more in the specialized code. And finally, this is, there is a format for how to adopt the specialized code that's now been done in a number of towns and cities around the state. It's pretty simple. So that is a nutshell of what we're talking about. I guess I am hoping that the Energy Committee, we decide that we want to encourage the town to do this, and in our capacity as advisors to the Board of Selectmen, encourage the Board of Selectmen to prioritize this and offer to provide briefings to town staff and whoever the board thinks we should talk to lay the groundwork.
Well, thank you very much, Barry. That's a pretty impressive summary.
Yeah.
I wondered, as I look ahead and think of this and where we'd have people we need to convince, does any of the state legislation involve money to train builders or to train municipal building staff in the new codes?
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff on the Department of Energy Resources website about trainings for both town officials and builders, and there have and there are local efforts as well. I know in Truro, the folks I was talking to are reaching out to try to organize a meeting specifically for builders. I mean, they've worked with this, the regional green community coordinators are assigned to help communities work through this. And Lisa, the green communities coordinator for our region, has been really accessible. And, I've sent her drafts of this presentation. And when I was struggling with interpreting some of the texts of the code, and went to her for help, and she went to her people at DOER, and she had an answer back the same day. So
Very good.
there are a lot of state resources behind making this happen.
Barry, would you think, I'm thinking of the hack issue, if one of two big pushes for affordable housing is against this, would you recommend that we try to change their minds very soon? I was thinking that they might be particularly amenable to arguments about health aspects of fossil fuels, and in particular gas on young children. Do you think that there'd be any hope in a public health approach to kind of soften this for them?
I don't know Alyssa personally, the executive director at HAC, who's a pretty prominent presence on the Cape on the issue. I know other folks who have been working with her. Don, blanking on the name. He's the associate director of Association to Preserve Cape Cod. Had spent a lot of last year working with her, trying to work through a consensus approach. But there are a lot of other folks in the climate community who are kind of probably more influential with HAC than I would be. And I assume there will be an effort by advocates in a bunch of settings to
Did you think that there's a possibility, as Joyce and I and Sandy know from participating in Next Door, there is a very, very strong anti-development component to the population here. All these Washashores who've come over the last 50 years now don't want any more people to come. Do you think that we could use getting this new stretch code passed to tell them this is a way of stopping housing from being built?
I was thinking more going the other route, that on the Mid-Cape, we'd have a much higher percentage of people working in healthcare and working for Cape Cod Hospital, that maybe we might have a population that could be kind of excited about this if we presented it to them.
Barry, one of the questions that I have is, with all of this being done, which I'm supportive of, have we looked into Eversource being able to handle the load of electric with what they have for infrastructure?
Well, part of the, I mean, there's a lot of background material on the development of both the updated Green Communities Code and the specialized opt-in code that DOER has published, and I've gone through a lot of it. And one of the things they looked at was the question of grid capacity, and they've got studies saying that realistically, there's no significant risk that the pace of electrification exceeds the pace of preparing the grid for it. Because remember, this is not a demand that all existing buildings get retrofitted and electrified.
Right.
That would be great in some sense, but only a tiny percentage of the housing stock is
It's going to be.
represented by the increase in new buildings every year. So there
Yeah,
are a lot of
and
other,
is
there are a
that-
lot of other pressures on the grid, and hopefully a fair amount of retrofitting will increase that. But new buildings are not the major source of
Of that.
new electric
So,
demand.
so the electric cars and the charges and all that, even with the small amount of buildings, it's not gonna upset the infrastructure here. I mean, I look at some of the stuff that's happening in California, and it's kind of frightening to see how fast they're moving, and they're not moving with the repairs on their infrastructure. So I don't want that same thing to happen in this area.
No, and I mean, nationwide, the improvement of the grid is one of the most critical pieces
Right.
of the whole puzzle.
Right.
And it has been, frustrating specifically here on the Cape, because the pace of expanding solar power has partly been slowed by Eversource's inability to absorb more power on its existing grid without requiring the solar developers to build new substations that make the projects infeasible. And there's conversations around the state about, should there be some better model of how to share the cost of expanding the grid to accommodate new renewable energy. And
Yeah.
so, when Eversource builds new power sources, the ratepayers as a whole absorb the new interconnection costs. My own view would be that would be the right way to approach the expansion of renewable energy. But clearly the legislature has a pretty good consensus that they want to solve this, and they now have an administration that wants to solve it. And hopefully that, especially with the new DPU, which has a lot of the authority over the interconnection issues, will push the utilities towards
Getting the
enhancing the infrastructure. So some of it is region-wide in terms of the grid interconnections that can't just be solved in one state, but the feds are clearly putting some new financial clout behind improvement of the grid overall.
Okay.
Well, Barry, we need to leave a small delta for Mike and his new project to solve with fusion.
I have been a fan of fusion energy since I was in high school. I think they took me to Brookhaven National Lab when they were doing some of the first experiments on controlled fusion, and have been waiting for it to happen since 1965.
Larry, where did you grow up?
Queens, New York.
Oh, okay. You're a homeboy then.
Are you a Queens guy?
Well, I was born in Queens, but grew up in Nassau County on the South Shore.
Where?
Baldwin.
Okay, yeah, and I grew up in Queens Village, which is right on the Nassau line.
Right, exactly.
But
I was born in
but-
a hospital on the Brooklyn Queens line, the hospital doesn't exist anymore. Lived my first 6 months on Woodhaven Boulevard. And then
I'm a believer in the possibility, we actually are on the brink, meaning the next 10 years of an engineering solution on fusion that makes it feasible in the long term. It's probably more like 20 to 30 years before it could actually come online. So it's not a near-term solution. And I was talking to Jim Wolf about this the other night, who argues strongly that we actually have the technologies now that are sufficient to supply 100% of our energy needs through renewable energy. That solar and wind work, they're economical, they're scalable. We just have to put the money into it to make it happen. I'm not, I'm agnostic as to how it gets fixed.
I have my college roommate is an astrophysicist who thinks that fusion is still a long way away. He would love it to happen, but and a lot of his undergraduate work when we were at Wesleyan together was they were doing work on plasma physics there, which goes hand in hand with nuclear stuff.
When I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be a nuclear physicist. Sputnik generation. They wanted me to be a nuclear physicist.
Yes, exactly.
I got all kinds of incentives, and so I've been a geek, and I read physics incessantly, even on my recent vacation. But I'm not going to try to solve it myself. I hope Mike does.
Well, yeah, we've sent a member of Energy Committee to go solve that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Good delegating, Joyce.
Yes.
So, it sounds like, at least among the people here, we'd have consensus that this is something we should be for, right?
I think so.
I'm strongly for it.
I'm for whatever is next down the path on nuclear. I'm a big nuclear guy.
Now, are
So-
you going to wait for nuclear to get down its path and do nothing in the meantime? Or do you think we should do this while we're waiting?
I think we should be going back to nuclear while we're waiting for fusion to come on board.
I kind of actually do too, in terms of, an all of the above strategy. But
I lived in a country for 5 years where 80% of the electricity comes from nuclear.
Is that France?
Yeah. Nobody's worried about nuclear accidents. Well, there are obviously people worried about nuclear accidents there, but the population generally is not worried about. And I've never met a tourist who didn't go to France because they're worried about a nuclear incident.
But this I was actually referring to was the specialized code. The
Yes.
code.
No,
Sandy, how about you?
I'm in favor of it. I'd like to know a little bit more to make sure that we do have like the infrastructure, et cetera, so that we don't get ahead of ourselves. But I mean, my son is an electrician and I'm seeing what he's doing in its new buildings right now. I think they're going that way. He works up in Orleans and Chatham. So some of the projects he's had are quite intense.
does he work mostly in new construction?
Yes.
Well,
Well,
the most recent housing projects, affordable housing projects in Yarmouth had an important number of points that they could get in their design proposals for high efficiency. Do we have any interest in maybe looking at one of those or talking to Mary Wagon from housing to kind of find out how that has worked. I'm thinking that we're going to have to talk about this. We're going to need some solid talking points, which clearly Barry can give us. But we also maybe want to have some local anecdotes and examples. And it sounds like a lot of people might have been exposed to the hack objection, and we want to be really ready to take that on.
Well, the new school worked with Cape Light Compact and Kevin, and they were working on most of these concepts. So it will be interesting. I know that they're still having their punch list and things that they're doing, but they have done a lot of this work already on that new school. Though I look at it with all the lights on and I go, oh my gosh, but anyways.
Yeah. What is the HVAC in the new school?
You know what? I really am not sure what the final design on that was, because
There's a bit of a tug of war on that, I think.
yeah, I'm really not sure what they got in there right now. I know that they're having some difficulties with some of the units. And I'm not sure what the final design was, because I was against many of the things that they were doing, and then working with Cape Light Compact to get the high efficiency equipment in there. But I really don't know. I'd have to ask.
Okay.
Okay. We'd love to know at some future point, again, for a local talking point, but no time pressure.
We can probably have a tour through the building, and I can have the HVAC gentleman probably do that tour with us.
Sandy, I would love that. Any of the rest of you interested?
Yes.
Well, May 6th is going to be their ribbon cutting, so let me see if I can talk to everybody. I have been, I'm still on the building committee, and I've been going to the meetings, and I've been hearing, some of the issues that they've been going through. The part with the energy piece came in. I was supposed to be involved very heavily in it. I was supposed to be right there with them as they were doing the design, etc. And then they basically just ignored me. Part of the reason why I retired. And it's been very nice being retired. I have loved every minute of it.
Joyce, I'll definitely reach out to Mary, who I know and work with, on climate stuff.
Oh, she's
other contexts, ASAP, because I keep meaning, but I just put an asterisk on my notepad. And the other local person who's really good on this stuff is Bob Riley, who is the construction manager for Habitat for Humanity. And
okay.
Long before the specialized code emerged, I had a long debrief with him about their work. And he's the guy who's actually figured out how to build affordable 1,200 square foot 3-bedroom houses, because that's basically what they do, that are super efficient, get award-winning. The HERS rating is the standard for measuring how energy efficient a house is, and they get financial incentives from the state for meeting new lower and lower HERS ratings, and they've done that consistently. And they're now putting people in houses that have basically no energy costs, because the solar panels on the roof supply enough to power and heat the house 100%, because they're so energy efficient.
I have a question, Barry. It sounds like he is a perfect person as somebody to handle questions about this. Is he a decent speaker? I mean, like to kind of have a discussion with, not a big presentation, but a discussion. I mean, because I know people have different talents, and sometimes, builder architects aren't the best speakers and so forth. But it seems like he would be a real resource.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a real, I mean, I need to talk to him about how willing he is to be involved on this issue. Because Habitat also is big fundraising agenda. But I've only spoken to him one-on-one. I haven't seen him in a public setting, but he seemed to me really smart and enthusiastic. He loves his work.
Great.
And
Well, that comes
he
through when
solves-
you talk to someone who loves his work.
Yeah, and he solved these problems over and over again. Just as he used to be in the private sector, I think, and doing this for a nonprofit. As he has succeeded.
Because you know what I was thinking? I mean, suppose we took on the, we won't call it the hack objection, but the hack objections content head on, and had something that would help fundraise for Habitat. Energy Committee could co-sponsor, and maybe have Mary Wagon in there as a sort of a co-sponsor from her area of town staff. That would be a big info session about this kind of stuff, but would make people comfortable with it, and would potentially, since a lot of people in Yarmouth do volunteer for Habitat, get some people actively involved that way, who of course are, by definition, if they're volunteers for Habitat, already committed to the vision of affordable housing.
Do you envision, Barry, us or the town having it on the warrant for the town meeting a year from now, or a special town meeting in the fall?
I don't prejudge the question. I felt like the Energy Committee was my starting point. That if we are willing to advocate for this, then I assume the next step is discussions with some of the other key players in the town to talk about that. And that I assume it is both a question of feasibility of having all of the prep discussions done, and what else the town has to get done at each of the coming town meetings. I just actually read the Article 18 stuff on the town website when I was looking for the link to this meeting, the $267 million appropriation, or whatever it is that we're going to vote on in a few weeks. And I was struck the town probably has a, particularly full plate at this town meeting, and I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Cases after that. I would, I'd love to see it happen in the fall, but
In some ways, wastewater is much more immediate than than getting zero construction zero carbon and new housing construction or building construction. I mean, that I think precedes all at this point.
I think it's an urgent public need, but I think it's also one that's more visible to people than the fact that the planet is cooking.
Yes.
although not unrelated.
No, not at all. Any more questions or statements about Barry's presentation? I mean, Barry, that was so helpful, and really a highly organized drawing in of those of us who are nowhere near as educated on this as you are. And it seems to me that we should be able to evolve some ways about talking this up to people where they are. And that might be different strategies for different audiences.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm expecting that as this develops, there will be a broader coalition of folks around the Cape organizing behind it.
Mm. It
But it's
occurs
really-
to
it's
me
really-
if,
I think I learned about this, maybe 6 weeks ago, that this code was now live and available for adoption. And so I don't think that awareness is very widespread yet, although I think both Pro and Wellfleet are going to adopt it this spring, and that'll begin to get some attention, at least awareness. of,
How long ago was it finalized?
The very end of December,
Oh, okay.
Mm.
I think.
I'm thinking that with it, if we were thinking of something that involved habitat, and this Bob Riley, who sounds very good, and had that as a sort of energy code education thing, we might want to involve on the health side some people connected with healthcare to praise the effect of the tightly designed house without fossil fuels on human residents. And maybe that also gives a push for habitat because it's what they do. But have them like one of the partners in say a public event. I'm always partial to anything that involves members of the public and refreshments. This is a known thing. I mean, Zoom has driven me mad.
Okay.
So I'd be willing to work on that.
Let's follow up and I'll talk about it, figure out.
Okay.
I like that. Okay.
Okay. Any final thoughts, or shall we move on to member items, ideas for future agendas and so forth?
Let's keep moving.
Okay. Okay. So do we have anyone who wants to contribute something or say that something is an important thing for, say, that some meeting of the next three's agenda? I think I may see 3 people who would like to get out in the sunshine. Am I correct?
By the way, on Sunday, I went down to Covell's Beach to see how Vineyard Wind was doing. And they're finished. They're gone. You'd never know they'd been there.
And it could have been a Yarmouth Beach, which would have made their project cheaper and which would have made the town of Yarmouth more progressive and richer.
Exactly. That's what I said on a posting of the anti Dowses, Save Dowses Beach crowd, which is the third wind project that is.
Is that Avangrid or?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay.
And they're really gearing up for action. And the anti-winders, I mean, it's not just people who want to save Dowses Beach. The anti-winders are coming out in full force there.
Oh, yeah. I saw some email correspondence from a Frank Haggerty, who was an associate of Eric Bibler. So yeah, we're getting national attention on this.
Yeah.
I mean, Haggerty lives out of state in Rhode Island, but we're getting further attention than that.
And it's great. The Avangrid's electricity is for Connecticut.
Yep. Well, I'm amazed that when it comes to construction on this stuff, people who cannot have their beach interrupted for a finite period of time for the larger good. I mean, it really is depressing.
Now, of course, Covell's Beach is the simplest of all of them, and Craigsville Beach, which is at the other end of Covell's Beach. They're really simple, and our Lewis Bay, onshore thing, and the Dowses Beach are much more complex in terms of engineering needed to minimize the disruption of the environment. But engineering people have been doing this. They've laid underground cables and undersea cables for 100 years.
Well,
I-
I think the big lesson politically here in Yarmouth about that Yarmouth Beach that didn't get picked as the connecting line out to the wind turbines is that you don't mess with the Hyannis Park Association. But I don't see why they would be opposed to more stringent energy codes if we, got
Yeah.
the message across. I mean, I think there was a strong element of NIMBY and some feeling against town government because of a past failure where their neighborhood could have been included in the Hyannis sewering, and there was something dropped some years ago that was a renewal of that inclusion, like a piece of paper, and that did not get filled in for the renewal, and therefore they lost that eligibility. So, I mean, I always figure that they have a log on their shoulder because of some things.
Yeah.
But there's a
Apparently, they
certain
also never wanted ferries, but that's a whole nother thing.
I have friends working in Falmouth because there's a, wind project that may need to come ashore there, and the local neighborhood that's potentially impacted is just filled with all of this just brain dead propaganda about how, electricity kills you. It's this sort of
Yeah.
the completely crazy view
Yeah.
of what could be wrong about conduits for wind power. And
Makes one despair of science teaching in the schools, doesn't it? Yikes. But I do assume that these tend to be older people, by which I mean people who haven't, say, graduated high school in the last 20 years. And I guess that makes it hopeful.
Well, electricity is always a tricky thing. I mean, it gets all involved with, microwave ovens and all sorts of things like that. And
Mm.
you can spin many a yarn about that.
Well, and we're afraid of what we can't see, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
But-
well, listen, I think we're done with our business for today. If anyone wanted to make a motion about anything,
So moved.
I'll make a motion.
you gotta say what it is, Bob.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, doesn't seem that anyone is opposed to that. The chair is an aye as well. Good to see you all. Barry, thank you again for that wonderful
Yes,
presentation. And
thank you,
let's
Barry.
discuss
Yes.
some more next time.
right.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.